I think I might have looked like a Manson family reject right there. I'm not sure. My
Wow.
lung,
To be rejected
my
by the Manson family.
I know. I know. Either meant I was too extreme or not extreme enough. Who knows? You be the judge.
So my spiel is here. You ready?
Here it is.
It's hard enough. God damn it, my dog. I swear. I swear. I got
It's
a
okay,
pot.
folks. This is a homespun podcast. This is this is
Yeah, don't
frustrating.
be don't be confused by all those pixels you see in my camera. This is a what is it? Like a garage shop uh show here. Now, it's hard to write a story about an unlikable character. But to write a story centered around a character with no identity must be a terribly difficult task. In today's offering from the glossy pages of the Metropolitan magazine, we have a story about a 29-year-old woman named Gita who is no one and goes through life making decisions as if crossing a river by jumping from one rock to the next, with no other option than taking the rock before her. It's a shitty analogy, but it's all I can think about as I type this during the typhoon, so just let me have it. When the story opens, Gita's an au pair to a British expat family in India, which is interesting because an au pair means a foreign worker. But she's Indian. In India. At this party, um, and at this party, she catches the eye. Well, I didn't even mention it was at a party. And the story opens on a party at the expat's house. And at this party, she catches the eye of a much older Indian man sitting in the corner. They marry, eventually, of no volition of her own, and they live together. The only thing she seems to slightly yearn for is to be left alone, and not in an angry, door slamming way, but in a more of a wouldn't that be nice kind of way. Eventually, Shrikantha, I can't pronounce his name, I'm sorry, everyone. The husband suggests she have a kid. That might keep her more busy than happy, and she says yes. She can't have children, so they adopt. And this is when the story really starts. When you have an 8-year old who may be unlikable, but sure is a character who is thrust into the story. She is she is Rainey's. She That's not how it is. She and Rainey are foils. One, Gita, orphaned by death. The other, Rani, orphaned in name only as she still has parents, just ripped asunder from them by poverty and someone trying to make a buck. This is when the story really begins. On this episode of Boozin', a breeze picked up, bringing the smell of grilled chicken from the hotel next door, and she felt a quick pang of hunger for meat. You Are My Dear Friend by Madhuri Vijay. What'd you think of the story?
Yeah, I loved it. I really did. I loved. So I didn't. An idea occurred to me about halfway through reading it the first time
Uh-huh.
that you know India's cultural legacy is enormous. It's dense. It's Byzantine, and it's presented. It has to be presented even to school children across the country in the most condensed form,
Mm-hmm.
because the study takes several lifetimes with any kind of alacrity. But one story that's actually probably perhaps universal to anyone in Indian schools, or even to dumb whiteys like us beyond her august borders, is a story of the Buddha.
Right.
The his specifically as it relates to this story, how he essentially learned what the world was when he left his cloister, when he left his father's palace, um, and what what he did with that knowledge thereafter. But it's an interesting way to frame this story. You Are My Dear Friend. When Gita is like Siddhartha was 29 when she left her cloister. Actually, she was in several cloisters. Her family is
Oh yeah.
described as encasing her in love before they died. She describes living in the hot courtyard of the convent that took her in after her parents died, and of course, Her life is very comfortable and regular when she works for the Bakers, this expat family that
Yeah.
actually treats her rather well. They treat her with some. They can't help but patronize her, it would seem, because they are, as you say, referring to an Indian woman in her own country as a foreign worker. But they give her a lovely room with very comfortable pillows. They don't care what she does when she's not working. They don't try to control her life
Hmm.
outside of when they expect her to take care of their children. So that's a very regular cloistered sort of life. And of course, she's cloistered inside her husband's giant house. She sits in the courtyard. I
Hmm.
mean, she's
Until they
literally
get
the
married.
only time we ever really see her before the adopted child arrives is in the courtyard. So why did Siddhartha leave? Well, it's just there's a certain one telling of the story is that there's only so many there's only so long that you can live without yearning for something else. That this yearn to be in the world somehow could be a universal human trait. Whether you have a different dancing girl each night entertain you with the most sumptuous spreads in the evening, as Siddhartha apparently enjoyed in his day, or if you have all your animal needs provided for by your employers who don't make too much of a demand on you, as in the case of Gita, where you have love, your
Mm.
parents loved you. It's the sorrow of having
Right.
lost them, which is never really described. Gita is not necessarily described as sorrowful in the story about her parents' death. We're supposed to supply that ourselves. One thing is that it seems that growing up in a convent was very boring. It seems like it's very like she can't look at the think of the sister's Bible, giant briefcase sized Bible, or the sister at the convent,
Mm.
without feeling back in that boring, somnolent, hot courtyard again of the convent where she was raised. But again, she's bored, right? She marries this this much older man, can't have kids. Here's the thing: they adopt a psychopath, and that's like you said in your beautiful précis. That's where the story really begins. And so you want to be in this world. You want to have, as Srikanth puts it to his wife, you want to have a child. Okay. Are you ready? Yeah, I'm ready. She's leaving the gates of the palace.
Mm.
She doesn't have, Chana. She doesn't have. Chana could explain these things to Siddhartha. What's that? What's happening to that man over there? Oh, that's sickness. That man is sick. What is that? What happens to people when they're sick? Oh, they may recover, but a lot of them die. What's death? Oh, we encounter death later on. She doesn't have anyone to explain what's happening to her, right? So
Right.
life, you invite life in. You want to have a child. Well, sometimes children are psychopaths. Sometimes they come in and they stab you. Sometimes they come in and they demand jewelry. Sometimes they come in and they lie. One these are very different works of art, of course, but this short story and The Dark Knight, the movie, have something in common. You can't trust a single thing the Joker says. Nothing he says is true, or maybe all of it's true.
Mm.
You just don't know. You want to know how I got these scars? You never really know how he got those scars. You just know that something is revealed about his psychology in each story he makes up. With her, she describes men, strangers surrounding her house in the jungle where she grew up.
Mm.
She describes her father naked, happy with his food. She describes her birth mother fell into a deep place and tried to drag her down after her. You don't know if it's as true or not. And if it's true, what kind of reality is it really describing? Her father may be a communist in the woods, a
Mm.
Maoist terrorizing the countryside.
Mm.
It's just a
Of
very, but here's the
the
point.
adopted daughter. Just to be clear.
Adopted daughter. Right. Here's the point: is that when you go out into life, when you leave home, as it were, when you leave, this is what may happen. Life may look right back at you with the pitiless eyes of a predator. It's astonishing. It's a
That's
wonderful way to.
interesting.
I think it's just. I think the creation of the daughter, the adopted daughter, as a manipulative psychopath with a million different smiles, each one of them she can employ at will to try to get her way.
Mhm.
It's a very interesting way to show how naive Gita really is, and how vulnerable she is, you know, in this predatory sort of
Mhm.
hellscape of Bangalore that we see in this novel, in this short story. What'd you think of it?
It's I mean, obviously, I didn't know that. I don't know the story of the Buddha. So I didn't have that going into this,
I'm
unfortunately.
not saying it was a conscious. Maybe it works, maybe it doesn't.
Well,
But I was
there
just
is a
struck by the same age when they left their cloister, 29. I was just
that I
struck
did
by
not
that.
know that.
Like, oh, this kind of makes sense.
Uh,
This kind of makes sense. But again, because Buddha had one home, or
mm,
Siddhartha, before he became the Buddha, had one home. She had four
uh,
before they adopted Rani. But the element
mm,
of her being encased in love, her being in a courtyard,
mm.
her being cared for, I think that's kind of describes the encapsulated nature of Siddhartha's early naive years.
Well,
But
as
anyway,
you
whatever. Maybe I'm making much of it. I interrupted you too, by the
no,
way. Sorry.
as you could tell from my little spiel, I was fixated on the fact that I felt she like her lack of identity, her lack of desires, her lack of choice making,
Right. Right.
decisions. Like
Did you-
she doesn't decide to get married. He asks her, like she says yes, she agrees to all these things, but she doesn't really, she doesn't pursue anything. And I thought that was quite interesting until she meets the child. Really, like even when she doesn't, we have no inkling that she wants a child in the piece until the husband, they're in bed, and he's like, "Oh, you want the child, don't you?" And she's like, "Yes." And then they have one. That's it. They go out and get one. It's it's interesting how much, like, she's an au pair. She's given a, like, even her husband calls her that. She's got a French title, right? Which means a foreign caregiver. And then she's brought up in a Christian school by nuns. Like, her husband wins the lottery. And I'm not familiar with the lottery, but a lot of these aspects are not her native culture after she loses her family. And I think
Right.
that has a lot to do with the fact that she doesn't have an identity, really. It's a lot of stuff that's put upon her. She doesn't choose to be Christian. She is forced to be Christian because of the, like, where she goes to school. And then she makes her husband to be Christian, or sort of. He kind of falls asleep during the hymns. It's
He's just such a middle-aged man. It's wonderful. Like when
the
he's done making love, he falls on top of her. He just plops down on top. Like he falls asleep during mass.
mm,
He falls asleep when he gets home. He comes home. All he wants to do is just have food waiting for him. He gets pissed off. There's no food
I
when there's no
worry that
dinner.
a part of my problem reading these books or these short stories is I don't know how you read. I read to make my, like, literally, I read to go, okay, how can this story make me be a better writer? That's how I read
Mm,
all the time. I'm
mm.
constantly trying to read to steal. And so when I'm reading this, I'm going through it through that kind of, like, I don't know how to stop it. I don't even know if I read for pleasure anymore. I think I read just to become a better writer. And
Mm.
I'm reading this story, and the thing that I was struck by from the first part of it is how quickly we gloss over so many things. Like, I missed being in a moment in this story until the child comes into play. I feel like it's a lot of exposition. That's where the story started for me. That's where I really got into it. And the other parts of it, I just felt like we didn't live in any moment. It just hopped, hop, 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 hop. And
Yeah.
maybe that's effective. Maybe that's part of it. But I um I wish I got out of it what you did. My favorite part of the story is that line when she's at one point, like, they can't parent this child. They don't know how to. And
Right.
the father goes, okay, if you can't, who's a dick? But that actually might be a cultural thing with how Indian men are. I'm not sure. But he's like, this is your child. I've already had mine.
Competent. It's a man thing. It's just a man thing. I'm competent. And never men don't want to be men don't want to appear incompetent,
Mm.
especially especially in matters of you know matters relating to themselves. I mean,
Mm.
this is his house. This is his wife. This is his
Right. Yeah.
adopted daughter. As little as he wants to do with her,
That was
nonetheless,
what
it
I was
reflects
talking
on.
about. Mm.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah. No, that's what I was talking about was the attitude of like, well, I've had my daughter, this is your daughter, that I thought was odd. And I didn't mean to sound racist. I just think there's a lot in the story that is cultural that I do not get. But
sure.
uh the when the father packs her bags for Rani and tells her to leave and she leaves, and then the father takes off after her,
Yeah,
like she's coming
that's
back.
scary.
She's coming back. Fuck, and bolts out after because she
What's
doesn't come back.
amazing, what I thought was, I thought the author, Madhuri
Mhm.
Vijay's characterization of him was a little stilted. I thought it was at first. You know, I'm like, okay, we have the tow-headed little blonde girls in the
Mhm.
beginning. We have the drunk, overbearing English woman in the. I'm like, all right, we have the patriarchal, frog-looking, tired-looking, puffy middle-aged man. I'm like, are we going to stop with the crudely drawn stereotypes?
Right.
But I felt that that ended, and that stereotype is one thing we absolutely have to mention before we stop.
That's a good point.
But one thing I thought that was very interesting was that a stereotypical dumb middle-aged fossil, right,
Mhm.
would have socked his wife in the face if she had suggested in his moment of weakness that he was a bad father, which she did.
Yeah, she does.
Gita says, quote, in her normal voice, "You don't know where your daughter is, do you?" When
Her other
Rani
daughter.
is,
Yeah.
when she's been completely undermined, his foolish attempt to appear competent has
Uh-huh.
failed. He's naked in his failure. He's watching his adopted daughter disappear into the crowds.
Uh-huh.
And then his wife turns to him and says, in her quote, normal voice, "You don't know where your daughter is, do you?" And he's like, "Oh shit." And he
See.
runs after her because he
Uh-huh.
wants to make up, in a way, he wants to make up for the shitty fathering he did. Like, it's very, he would have,
Mhm.
a man who would have fit that type would have batted her right in the head, would have hit
Mhm.
her.
And it's
He
a great
didn't.
moment. It's a great moment in the piece, right? Because that's like, and then she's alone,
Yeah.
right? Like that's the moment that Gita is alone in the story. And the line that I picked was, "She got the pang of wanting chicken." They're vegetarians,
Yeah.
right? At least he is because of her. And that is a moment where she has this like
Hmm.
desire, this want. And it's the first
Sure.
real time in the piece that I can think of where there
Mhm.
is a desire from her, other like a want to for something.
Well, this is the thing. If you survive your encounter with the world, no matter how terrible,
Uh-huh.
if the world reveals itself to you, and after you invite it, after you invite it in,
Hmm.
if you if you invite the world in and you look it in the eye and you survive, you grow. It's your education. This is what
Hmm.
suddenly smells delicious. Suddenly, when they finally kick Rani out, suddenly she occupies her body with greater confidence. Gita
She
does.
does. Yeah.
Use of her small stature, she walks with her shoulders back. You know, she feels like she understands
Hmm.
herself a bit better. That enigmatic personage at the very, very, very end of the story who reminds her a little bit of Rani. Just this, what does she call it? Insolently sexual, like indolent and sexual about her. I'm trying to remember. Like there's this young girl, like she's
Yeah.
probably
So
late teens, early 20s. She still has pimples because the makeup is covering her pimples. She has her hair tied in a very intricate style
mhm.
that you can't understand, and she has this hauteur that she's occupying her space in a way that Gita finds magnetic, but at least Gita knows that she finds it magnetic. She circles around this young girl to be around her energy. She's
she
been
work.
touched.
She's a worker
She's
at the local cosmetic counter at the local shop.
yeah. I'm sorry I didn't lay that groundwork, but yeah, that's what she's just she's a makeup salesman
Hmm.
salesperson at the cosmetic shop in the department store that's been built on land that once belonged to her and her husband that
Uh-huh.
they sold off, and they're allowed to go in even though they don't live in the place, whatever. Uh, but my point is that Rani, in some way, comes from out there, as it were, this terrifying uh, little girl, like this person who has the power to subvert everything you believe in effortlessly. And you're supposed to, as her mother, adopted mother, she's supposed to be grateful for your love.
Hmm.
And all these things that Gita took for granted. Well, I'm going to be her mother. She's going to love the room I picked out for her.
Yeah, she's gonna
Oh,
want to sit in this chair and stare at a tree.
I want to
Yeah.
it's gorgeous the way I do. And she's like, no, you're rich. You have jewelry. You can give it to my real mother. He calls Shrikant, an 8-year-old girl, mind you, calls her adopted father an old cocksucking bastard. So
Yeah.
you can only imagine. You don't need to know exactly how she grew up to know how she grew up. It's one of those things. But here's the thing about stereotypes, real quick. So this this short story is loaded with them. Even as it tries to subvert these stereotypes, the story is loaded with stereotypes.
Hmm.
The drunken finger snapping foreigners who who treat Indian people like little babies that they have to put in these they have to make a room for the Indians don't know how to make a room for themselves, so they have to buy pillows and cloths and stuff. The tow-headed children, the racist parties, the dinner parties, the grumpy patriarchal middle-aged man
Mm.
who marries for sex, the casually racist orphanage people, the stigma against tribal people, which apparently Rani is.
Hmm.
And interestingly enough, Odisha, the province that Gita comes from, there's a lot of tribal Indians who live in there too. The Adivashis, I believe they're called it. Anyway, but it's like this little girl really is this terrifying stereotype, like the other from the backwoods, who's going to
Yeah.
steal from you and stab you and conspire with street strangers, which she does. Apparently, she does talk to
She
somebody off the street. You
she's
don't
brought in
actually
like
know
a
what she
mangy
said.
pup, right? Like she's got like hair that's all mangled and
She
she
growls at
she
you. Right?
she's frightening. She's a frightening little
Terrifying.
character.
Terrifying. There's no depth to her.
So, what did you not like? Are
There's
you against the stereotypes then?
No, I think it's remarkable that it happened. I think that, it's 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 remarkably subversive. It's like, and here's the thing, it's ambiguous too, as well. So they don't know how to raise, like you pointed out earlier, Gita and her older husband, they don't know how to raise her.
Mhm.
So the question is, could she ever have been raised? Is she actually a psychopath,
Mhm.
or is she just very hurt by something, and there's a way to kind of love her and guide her in such a way
Mhm.
where she could actually become socialized? We don't ever get to know that because they kick her the fuck out,
See, that
kick her
bothered
out.
me. That bothered
Of
me
course
as
it
a
does.
parent. Yeah, I mean, maybe it's supposed. She was
Of
fucking
course it does.
stolen from her parents, right? Like,
She was stolen from her parents. We don't know anything about her parents. We have no reliable knowledge that
uh,
they're even. The only thing we
yeah.
know is that they're alive. The narrative doesn't seem to challenge the fact that they're alive.
Mhm.
But everything else, part of it is supplied by this old racist with a coal miner's cough who works at the orphanage. And part of the knowledge is supplied by Rani herself, who
Mhm.
seems about as, if somebody had a gun to my head and said, "Bitch, Rani, psychopath or just very hurt," I'd say psychopath. Like I don't think I've read a more terrifying depiction of a child in literature
It's the
ever.
smiles. It's the smiles. It's
Oh
the
my
smiles.
God. That's how
Yeah.
you know Madhuri Vijay is an excellent writer. Just the you, which she is.
Mhm.
This one piece is any bit of evidence. Those fucking smiles, the way. Dear listeners, you have to read the story just for Rani.
Mhm.
Just for this omen like depiction of a child, and it's not frivolous. It actually serves a narrative purpose, as we
Mhm.
as we've discussed, this idea, of getting what you wish for, or something like along those lines. But I'm just interested that the story did not subvert stereotypes, but then it did. It does at times. And I would need more time to develop this
Mhm.
idea. But when Srikanth actually runs after Ronnie, after his wife had just said, you don't know how to fucking raise kids, basically,
Mhm.
like, you failed too. And he's like, oh my, and there's this moment where he must have been like, oh my God, I did. And he runs after, tries to bring her back. He's like, then he goes back to being this, sex ogre. And after he's done banging his much younger wife, it's like, we can't take care of her anymore. That right. So
I
it's
wonder
like, oh, they.
if that's because that's what we are too, right? We're all kind of fulfill our stereotypes, except for when we don't.
Yeah,
You know,
except for
there's
when we don't.
something. The thing that we didn't talk about is "You are my dear friend."
What does that even mean? Yeah,
It's
and given,
the
it's
other au
uttered
pair.
by the other. Well, actually, no, she wasn't an open. She was like a
No,
chamber. The lower.
yeah,
She was lower down on the hierarchy of servants.
yeah. That's
She has
who
no
it's.
name. She has no fucking name.
Mm-hmm.
Notice that she wasn't named. The fucking bakers even had a name. The father who says one line, we know his first and last name.
I don't remember his first
Char-
name, but yeah, they're not
Charlie
actual
Baker.
bakers. They're Mister and Mrs. Bakers. They're the expats.
Sorry,
Uh,
yeah,
no,
they're
no, no, no.
different.
I had to read it that way because it says the bakers, and I actually it's the first line in the book. I'm like, oh, are they bakers or are they? No, you find out that they're not bakers. They are the bakers. Um, yeah, I thought we would talk about that more, but is it a fitting title then?
I don't even know what it means. I don't
Yeah,
know
me
what it
neither.
means. Is the story. I really
Uh,
don't. It just looks like a plot device. Like Gita gets stabbed
mhm.
after after this nameless servant who received a fatuous, like, like, you are my dear friend. Even Gita was worried that, oh, is this because Gita, remember, was guilty
Mhm.
that she had her morning freedoms. So she tried to mollify, and there's no evidence that the nameless servant woman actually
Mhm.
harbored these resentments. It's just in Gita's mind. So she gives her this, as she confesses to Rani later after she gets stabbed by the girl. It's a piece of trash. It's worthless. It's not jewelry.
Uh-huh. It's a
This
pendant
piece
that
of
says
trash.
"You are my dear friend" on it that she gives
Right.
to the
This
person out of.
pendant.
Mhm.
This pendant purchased cheaply in a market that is valueless. That with this fatuous, overblown statement, what the whole story is named after. There's got to be something there to that. There's got to be
Uh-huh.
something there. And I like how you pointed out at the very beginning that, how do we enjoy a story where the character is really unlikable?
Mhm.
Gita is yes, unlikable. I agree, but in the same way that kind of we all can be. I don't. What's amazing to me, what I really enjoyed by the end, is that there really seems to be a marginally greater sense of self-awareness on her part.
Yeah,
You know,
it's
I like
it's
that.
there's transformation in this piece. There
She
truly is.
wants to be a transformation, right? She wants to be Rani in a
Mhm.
very reductionist sense. She wants to walk in and take the fuck over, I think, which is what
Mhm.
Rani did. And which she attributes this kind of seductive uh, uh, presence. This
Mhm. That's fascinating. Yeah,
this
because in the house, right?
how does she, how does she describe the young woman at the end as exposed?
Mhm.
She's exposed, and people like Gita circle around her. Wow, she
Mhm.
wants to be Rani
Yeah.
in a way.
Like in
But
her
what does
own
that
house, she wants to
in
sleep
her own house?
in like not Ronnie. Gita wants to sleep in a small room that's like a cupboard, not a cupboard, for lack of a
Mm,
better term at the moment, shed. Not
mhm.
in her house, and not even like in the master bedroom. Well, Rani takes over. She
She
becomes
takes
the
everything.
president in the house that she'd never been in before. So next
She calls
week,
her. It's,
oh
it's
yeah,
just it's a hell of a good. It's a really good read. It's a
mm,
mystery. I still don't understand it. I probably have to read it again,
mm.
but it's well done. It's really well done.
So
Yeah.
next week on Boozum, we're going to be looking at Heirlooms by Brian with a Y, Washington. That'll be interesting. That's the one we're up to
Ooh.
next. Yeah, and that's been our show. I'm Darryl. He's Brett. Together, we comprise the boozing team. And until next time, keep scribbling. What
The
you laughing
booze
at?
and tea. I like that. What you laughing at?